This is Red Ice Radio. From the apparent to the esoteric. RedIceCreations.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Henrik Palmgren. Welcome back to Red Ice Radio. It's good to have you with us once again. And a warm welcome to everyone who's tuning in for the first time as well. RedIceCreations.com. That's the website. Go there for much more if you're not familiar with our format or many of the areas we discuss and address. And we do have a real treat for you here today, a special program with comparative mythologist, author and teacher John Lash, who returns for a fascinating and important program on the topic of the Archons from the Gnostic, or should we say the Nag Hammadi perspective. And if you haven't heard about this subject matter before, this is an incredibly important area that I think it's vital that you have some understanding about in order to help you to navigate in the madness, if you will. We are going to begin to discuss the Gnostic theory of alien intrusion. We'll take it from the top, so no worries if you haven't heard about this before, but this is material that connects with the ET question, the Greys, the reptilians, but also the mind parasites, the intra-species predators, inorganic beings, and the transhumanist agenda as well. And the question is why humanity is turning towards, or in some cases being forced to turn to the synthetic and artificial. Please stay with us. Well, it's a delight to have John Lash back with us here on Red Ice Radio again. It's always intriguing, always interesting to talk with you, John. And as always, of course, we appreciate your time. Welcome back, sir. How are you today?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Henrik. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to talk with you.
It's really interesting things that we've been witnessing in the last few years since we've talked and since we touched base. The theme, obviously, of this program here today is something that we've talked about before. Back in 2008, we specifically discussed the idea of the Archons in connection to some of the technology developments that we can see around the world. We want to talk about this. The synthetic, the artificial, the everything we can see from artificial food, basically, a version of technology all the way up to computers, brain implant, chips. There's so much that are happening, and obviously since 2008, there's been even an incredible amount of new developments happening in this area, in this particular subject, but. To get people up to speed, John, I think it's a good idea to just do a brief background on the idea of the Archons for those who haven't heard about this before. So maybe you can kind of just set the theme for us here first, John.
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. A few years back, Henrik, when we first talked about this, I was just coming off the publication of my book, Not in His Image, which came out in November of 2006. Now, there's a lot about these so-called Archons in that book, and in the 5 years since it was published, it seems like the word Archon has really come into the vocabulary. Certainly, you find it in many places on the internet. It's being used widely. The word Archon and the adjective, which would be Archontic, and they're sometimes called the Archontes. These are Greek words, and that's very. I find that a good development because as far as I know, when I wrote Not in His Image, and you would second this observation, I believe, I was the first person to bring out specifically the Gnostic theory of the Archons, which is found in the Nag Hammadi writings and is a great warning for humanity. To alert us to those forces that can alienate us from the earth and actually cause us to betray and abandon our own humanity. There's a tremendous message regarding the Archons in the Gnostic writings. So while I wouldn't necessarily claim to have put that word into public discourse, it doesn't matter who put it in, I think I can claim that the Gnostic version of the Archons that is currently becoming more and more discussed originated with my book in 2006.
That's right. And I remember, John, one other thing that really got me, into the subject overall was rather an article that you wrote. Maybe it first was published on your own website. Not sure. I picked it up from somewhere else back in, I think it was 2006 or 7, called The Gnostic Theory of Alien Intrusion. And here's really where the whole subject matter kind of touch base, if you will, then with the ET UFO phenomena. Do you recall that article, or do you recall anything from that overall theory that you just can kind of talk a little bit about? Because that's a good connecting point. There's obviously so much more to the idea of the Archons, what they are and so forth, but for people who haven't heard about it, there is a connection with the so-called alien phenomena, correct?
Totally. In fact, for those who are getting onto this topic for the first time here, I would recommend you go to metahistory.org and go to the site guide and go to Gnostic. And in the Archon files, you'll find that essay. Certainly, I think it came out a few years before my book. It's certainly a signature essay, a key essay that really puts on the map in in clear terms, in explicit terms, and not complicated terms, what the Gnostic teachers of the mysteries told us about the danger of mind parasites and alien intrusion on this planet. So to just make a resume of that article, let me cite a few of the key points. The first point is that the Gnostics, who were shamans and seers in the ancient mystery schools, had capacities of paranormal observation. They were parapsychologists who could, well, first of all, they were shamans and seers who could look into other worlds, who could look beyond the physical dimension, and who could understand the eruptions of the supernatural into this world, if you will. Okay? At the same time, they were trained in noetic sciences, that is to say, in parapsychology, so that they were able to evaluate and assess the information that they received. This is really an important point. I'd like to stress this. Anybody and everybody can have psychic experiences, and most of us have had them at one time or another in our lives. We can have dreams, we can have lucid dreams, we can have visitations from different entities, we can have hostile encounters, UFO abductions, of course. But the trick is to be able to analyze and deconstruct and assess these experiences correctly, so that we come out of these experiences with an understanding of the phenomenon based in human sanity, not just based in speculation and weirdness. The Gnostics were paragons of human sanity in that respect. And what they taught in the mystery schools about alien intrusion is essentially two things. They taught that among all the other dimensional and beings that we might encounter, psychic entities, or other strains of humanity who might be floating through our world now and then, who live on other planetary systems. You know, they admitted and allowed all this. But they taught that if there were one predatory species among these, we would have to know what it was. We would have to be able to identify it. Because one is all it takes, you know?
That's right.
One is all it takes. It doesn't take 6 or 7 different alien hostile species attacking humanity, and all it takes is one. And so their point was very simple. They said, if we can identify this one, we're already in a position to defend ourselves. And they identified this one predatory species as the primary threat to humanity. They called them the Archons. And they had a whole story about the Archons. The first part of the information they gave was a mythological scenario, a background. They actually explained how the Archons originated and where they originated and what produced them. So I don't think that this is remarkable information coming from, thousands of years ago. I mean, the Nag Hammadi documents are only about 1,600 years old, but the information contained in them, or I should say the sacred instructions in them, are much, much older, as you know. And so they gave us the background. We need the background. We need the backstory, as it were. And they explained that these Archons are not highly advanced entities from another civilization associated with another star. in this galaxy, nor do they come from another galaxy. They come from this galaxy, according to the Gnostics' teaching, and they were produced in this galaxy before the solar system and the Earth, as we know it, came to be. So there's a long trajectory of cosmic development that the Gnostics were able to perceive in their heightened perception. That is the role of shamans. In every culture, the role of shamans is to remember the phylogenetic history of the race. That is to say, the race memory of our own genetic identity, to remember and recall our story. And shamans have always been storytellers and guardians of the story of their tribe. In any indigenous region where you find shamans, you'll find they have that role. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. Connecting with that, John, I just wanted to ask you about the accounts of that these were oral traditions primarily. We today come from a point of view that if it hasn't been written, it's not true, if you know what I mean. Just want to, kind of emphasize that point a little bit, because I believe that there is a specific reason for this as well, because as soon as you walk into the realm of writing things down, it's more to it than that, obviously. But as we know, John, the Romans and so forth were masters at both manipulating history because they wrote everything down. But today, from our perspective, these are the sources we go back to. These are the people who were writing at the time. So from their point of view, it's very easy to skew history. But the importance of myth here is that, or the storytelling, is that this was something that was alive. This was something that was a part of a tribe, meaning the records couldn't burn down and they lose the whole story, if you know what I mean. This is a story that was alive, constantly updating, retold to either the whole, tribe or culture, or maybe just a few people that actually had it then, as you say. But there's something more to that they had it in their hearts, meaning that this is not a dead, stale story. Can you talk to that a little bit, John?
Well, that's a brilliant observation and extremely relevant to the subject here. Yes, what the Gnostics did write down at a certain point late in their history, they started to write these things down around 800 BC or so. In fact, they introduced literacy to the whole classical world around that time, around 800 or 900 BC. They were the ones who taught and propagated literacy and wrote the first books and established the first libraries. These were the Gnostikoi, or the Teleste of the mystery schools. They had behind them a fantastically long oral tradition. What is so important about understanding an oral tradition? Well, I can think of two things. First of all, we're coming back to the oral tradition right now. You and I are in the oral tradition at this moment, aren't we?
That's right.
We are talking here and people are listening to us, and they get something from listening to your voice and my voice, and something from the interaction, because we're alive now. And they sense there's something in the human body that senses the truth when someone speaks. There's a resonance, as it's called. And so the resonance of truth is preserved in oral teachings. And the integrity of a myth or story, whether it be that of the Australian Aborigines or the Apaches and Navajos of America, or even the ancient Greeks, the integrity of their mythical story depended upon people who embodied that story and who could carry it in their bodies and transmit it through their voices. And and that was the way this information, this sacred instruction I'm giving you now, was originally imparted. Then it came to be written down, and that was kind of like an emergency measure, actually, that the Gnostics took at the time when they decided that the education of humanity needed to go to another level, and that people needed to be taught the responsibility of reading and writing, and taught the responsibility of critical thought, which goes along with it. When you read something, if you don't have any critical thought, you're likely to just believe what you read. Of
course.
Unfortunately, right? Many people do.
Yeah.
But if I hand you a document I've written, or an anonymous document, or it has some famous name on it, and I say, here, Henrik, read this, I expect you to take the responsibility to apply your critical thought to what you're reading. You see?
That's right.
And that is exactly what the Gnostics wanted to do. They came out at a certain moment, as I say, it was about 1,000 years BC, and they said, humanity's coming to a tremendous turning point. And in order to guide them correctly, we must now give them the tools of reading and writing that everyone can have. Previous to that, forms of sacred writing and codes had existed, but secular writing that everyone could use, that ordinary people could use, did not exist previous to that time. So they said, we're going to introduce secular writing, and with it, we're going to teach people the responsibility for critical and deconstructive thinking. And so, fortunately, they did write down these things, and some of their writings have been preserved in these rare documents that were found in Egypt in 1945. And among that written record is this startling account of alien beings. So to get back to very quickly, let me profile that again so that we can, so that those who haven't heard about this before can get on board with us. They basically said two things about these alien beings. First of all, they gave the backstory. They said where they came from. Now, bear in mind that what they said does not correspond to what a lot of people are saying today about ETs. Bear that in mind.
How's that?
Well, one of the most common assumptions, as soon as you use the word ET or advanced civilization or space brothers or whatever you want to call it, an image immediately pops to mind when that language is used. And the image is, oh, somewhere out there in infinite space, surrounding some other star or in some other galaxy or some other star system, is an advanced civilization. And they are not human, they are aliens, or they are extraterrestrials of some kind. Maybe they have a humanoid form, maybe they don't. But the picture that always comes to mind is that they are floating around, say, in our galaxy, in another world system, and they have the advanced technology that allows them to travel through interstellar space, and now they're coming to our system. And this is a very common sort of science fiction paradigm that spontaneously pops up whenever we talk about ETs. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what the Gnostic seers told us was not at all like that. Not at all. So whether or not you would, and I don't ask anyone to take their word on faith, by the way, but whether or not you would agree with what they said, bear in mind that what they said was distinctly different from this. They said that the particular threat to humanity is this species of Archons. It's a species of inorganic beings that actually arose in the early stage of the formation of our solar system, before the Earth itself was formed. When the other planets, particularly Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, and the two inner planets were forming, and the prototypal stages of the solar system were evolving in the galactic limb, which is where we're located, the Earth did not exist at that time, according to Gnostic cosmology. The Earth came into being later by a different process, an entirely different process than the rest of the solar system was formed. And the Earth was captured in the inorganic celestial mechanics of the solar system. And that inorganic world of the solar system is the habitat of the Archons. So the Archons are not from Alpha Centauri, they're not from some planetary system circulating a star in the Great Bear. They're actually from the solar system itself, and they arose at the origin of the solar system. This is what the Gnostic seers tell us, and it's a unique teaching, something that bears reflecting on very closely.
And see, that would make sense also then from the point of view that we get the filtering down of the of these kinds of stories of abduction-like scenarios. We have intrusions, if you will, of different levels, and obviously at that point, it's a modern phenomenon, just as you pointed out, that we chose to put the ET banner on them, and today we think that they come here then with the the flying saucers and all that. But
right.
what I'm getting at is that their presence seemed to have been there from day one, even those who speculated that they've actually had something to do with the interfering, if you will, genetically with the human species. Can you talk about that, John?
Sure. There's another common meme or paradigm that's floating around that's getting a lot of attention, a lot of discussion over the past few years. It was largely defined by Zecharia Sitchin, who started writing books about 40 years ago. And I call it the Sitchin scenario, or the Anunnaki script, which is supposedly taken from Sumerian cuneiform tablets. According to this Anunnaki script, there was an advanced ET civilization on another planet called Nibiru, and they had some problems. I guess they were floating around somewhere else in our galaxy. Let's just confine this conversation today to our galaxy, folks, okay? Because I think if we can understand what's happening in our galaxy, in our backyard, then maybe we could jump a little later into, talking about some other galaxy.
Well, exactly. I agree with you. Let's begin with the, a galaxy, I guess that's local enough for you.
A galaxy is local enough, and the Gnostic myth is specifically about our galaxy. Everything that is described in there regarding the divine Sophia, the emergence of the Archons, and the creation of humanity itself is located and situated in this galaxy that we are in. So let's stick to that right now. So the Gnostic myth said that the Archons were here from the beginning. It does not say that they have an advanced civilization on any planet. It describes them as kind of mechanical engineers who construct the solar system and maintain it, but they cannot live on Earth. The Earth is an organic planet captured in an inorganic system. And they cannot live on Earth, but they can see and observe what's happening on Earth, and they're very attracted to the Earth. They envy us. This is what the Gnostics actually say. They use the Greek word phthonos, which means envy. They say that the archonic species of inorganic beings looks upon humanity and envies us because we are gifted in ways that they are not. And so they would like to intervene in our evolution. They would like to hack the human genome, which is called the anthropos in Gnostic teachings. But it is an amazing fact that the surviving Gnostic documents, which is just a flake of their massive output of teachings, contains a very clear refutation of Sitchin and the Anunnaki scenario. Mm. The Gnostics who lived at that time in the Middle East, they're from northern Iran, is where the Gnostic movement was founded, by the way, up between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, in the so-called plateau of the Urmian Plateau, or Urmian Plateau. The Gnostic movement was founded, and it was called the Magian Order. It was founded about 6000 BC, long time ago. And they observed things developing in the Middle East, so they certainly knew about the Anunnaki story, but they deconstruct this story. According to their version, and this is the only place I know, you tell me if you know otherwise, Henrik, it's the only place I know that gives a refutation and deconstruction of Sitchin's theory. Is found in the Nag Hammadi cosmological texts, where they say the Archons lusted after Eve, by which they mean that they lusted after our human genome, our biological evolution, Eve being the representation of our biology, the human matrix. And they wanted to rape Eve, which is a way of saying in mythological terms, they wanted to get their hands on the human genome, and they wanted to crossbreed with it. They did want to do that. But the Gnostic text is very explicit in saying that they did not succeed. They attempted, but they failed. And that the Eve, which is the psychic and biological part of our species, the part of us that is the part of us that is living, because the word Eve means living, she who is living, has an intelligence inherent to itself. And because our biology and our genetic makeup has an intelligence, a divine intelligence inherent to it, it repelled and evaded the Archontic attempt to crack the human genome. So this is a really remarkable fact, and I don't know, some people listening may have heard this for the first time, just as we're speaking, that whereas millions and millions of people today are, in my view, rather mindlessly accepting the Sitchin scenario, seizing upon it uncritically.
Yeah.
If you read the Gnostics, who were critically minded shamans and seers, they're saying, no, That's not true. That is what the Archons would have you believe. They would have you believe that they've done this, but they have not actually cracked the human genome. They've cracked our minds. They've cracked into our attention. They've cracked into our behavior. And the many ways in which they do that can be inferred from the Gnostic warning. But they have not literally cracked into the human genome because it is massively protected against that kind of intrusion. The immune system around our genome is immense, and it was designed in that fashion from the origin.
What's interesting about this now, though, here, John, is that we have human beings doing the job of the Archons, if you will. Cracking the human genome has been a big thing since, well, obviously since the millennium, since 2000, when they rushed to basically announce this at this date. And since then, that time, there's been a tremendous amount of work being done on this. And we can only idly stand by and obviously question why. We were given one version, of course, as we always are, an official, what I like to call the fairy tale in this case, that this is some kind of dream, if you will, by certain people who are involved in cracking the human genome, like Craig Venter, that we've discussed before back in 2008, that this is about unlocking the keys to all the secrets of human beings, of curing all disease, of huge amounts of promises that is being made in connection to this. And the question is here, John, are human beings acting alone here, do you think? Or do you think that we have human beings working, if you will, then maybe unbeknownst to themselves, for the Archons, doing their bidding, doing their job? What do you think?
Well, I would say this to summarize, and I say this after a long study and a long immersion in the subject, about the tactics of the Archons. We could talk about that for a long time, and it's extremely instructive to read what the Gnostics told us, because it gives us the basis for a critical detective scrutiny of these mind parasites. But I would sum it up in this way. The Gnostics said that the Archons envy us. They want to become like us. And so they attempted to graft themselves into our genomic identity. They failed. So then they went to plan B. It's like, well, this is how they thought, the Archons. Well, if we can't become like humanity, we'll get them to become like us. The diabolically clever twist.
Yep.
That's it in a nutshell. We'll get them to become like us. And you're absolutely right that this Human Genome Project is an archonic fantasy in which human beings, under the name of science, are actually acting out an archonic agenda. They're actually acting out. What is transhumanism? It's the archonic agenda that is blindly compelled to think that we can make something better out of ourselves than nature has made us. You know? That's a huge illusion. And that is the trap of the transhumanist agenda.
Yeah.
To believe that we can make something better out of ourselves than nature has made of us is a huge delusion and a lie. And those human beings who commit themselves to that lie, who get obsessed with it and involved with it, like Craig Venter and these hundreds and hundreds of other people, will be in turn, they are in the process of carving out their own annihilation. Because that lie is so deep, so deeply wrong, and so erroneous, that as they go deeper into the science to fulfill that, they are actually going deeper into their own destruction. And the project fails. And when that project fails, and I am feeling that it's not soon, not too long before we'll see how those projects fail. When those projects fail, or they produce disastrous or deviant effects like GMO foods, then we will wake up to what an illusion this is, and that we are actually not acting like human beings, but we are acting like the Archons would have us act.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, see, this is a theme that are running in the background, that it's about getting us in a position where we change, and we, in one way or another, then slowly turn into them, meaning that we become the foot soldiers, if you will, for their agenda. And maybe a little bit later, John, we can talk about maybe the interface, maybe how this happens, because again, are there such things as walkings? If we're talking about inorganic beings, then they would have to some way obviously influence our dimension, or maybe even physically, in that sense, incarnate into a body, a vessel, to actually implement some of these things. And we'll get to that. But I wanted to just, I'll go ahead, John.
Sure, we'll get to that, and I would like to specify a couple of points on that when we get there to make it really clear, to give people the option, those who are listening, you will have an option to consider this in an entirely different way than you have before. That is a great advantage of using the Gnostic deconstruction of this phenomenon. So just let me get back and contribute and provide the second point of their analysis, Henrik, and then we'll proceed from there. The first point of their description of the Archons, as I say, concerned the cosmic background. They tell us where they come from. You don't have to wonder. You don't have to say, are they from, are they from another galaxy? Are they from a star system in the constellation of Centaurus? No. They are unique to our solar system, according to the Gnostic teaching. And they are mind parasites who inhabit, they have a technology, they inhabit the solar system at large, but they cannot inhabit the Earth, because the Earth is an organic environment not suited to them. That's one of the reasons why when ETs do appear in this world, they only appear very sporadically or for moments at a time. People say, well, why don't they land, Well, the Archons can't land. They can't land because they can't live here, because their inorganic organisms are not designed for the terrestrial habitat. Second point, regarding the appearance of the Archons, and I know this is an amazing piece of information to people who've heard it for the first time. In the Gnostic cosmological texts, you find exact descriptions of ET abduction. They call it abducting souls by night. The Archons abduct souls by night, and they describe how they appear. They describe not only the behavior of these Archontic entities, but their appearance. And they say that there are primarily two forms in which they appear. There is the main form, which is a neonate or newborn. It is called, it is named after the Coptic word huhe, which means an aborted fetus. Now, to understand that term, aborted fetus, it's perhaps more correct to say a prematurely born fetus. The fact that it's aborted suggests that Archons cannot be born through a biological process into human form. They can't be. But they are like an aborted fetus, and so they resemble a child taken out of the womb with a large head, big eyes, and spindly limbs. So this is obviously the gray ETs described in Gnostic documents some 1,500 years ago. Secondly, they refer to an overlord or master type. The gray ETs, or the neonates, are more like the drones, and they exist in the millions, like a locust infestation of the solar system. But ruling over them is another class of Archon, which is described by the word Drakon, D-R-A-K-O-N. This is the only clue that you have in the Nag Hammadi writings to the identity of the Archon overlords. Well, it's one of the only clues. There's a second clue. And so they are a draconic or reptilian type. Drakon being reptile or dragon.
Yeah.
And this reptilian type is the overlord of the hive of drones who represent the vast majority of these locust-like cyborgs. They're cyborgs. The second important clue, and this will go into the subject of transhumanism again from another angle, that is our subject today. The second clue they give, and this was a great one, as you know, they say, oh, by the way, we'd like you Christians and you Jews who are living in the classical world at this time, around 150, 200 AD, we'd like to point out to you that we understand you have a new religion emerging here. It has a Jewish foundation and a kind of Christian packaging, and it's called Salvationist to Christianity. And in this religion, you recognize Jehovah or Yahweh as your Father God and the Creator. Well, we're Gnostic seers from the mystery schools. We have a 5, 6, 7,000 year tradition of shamanism behind us. We've observed alternative worlds. We've worked in schools and teams for many, many generations to perfect our knowledge of the cosmos. And we're here to tell you that your Lord God, Jehovah, is a demented alien and he's working against humanity.
Oops. How about that?
How about that message? And so they actually identified the Lord Archon, as he's called, the main reptilian overlord, whom they called Yaldabaoth. They identified him as Jehovah, or the Father God of Judaism and Christianity. And they said, watch out, because if you follow the dictates of the ideology, in the religious ideology of Yahwehism, whether it be in the Jewish form, in the Christian form, you're at risk of taking a course that will lead humanity to self-destruction. So that was the warning that the Gnostics gave us, the signal that came out of the mystery schools 1,500 years ago, loud and clear as a bell, and it is still clear today.
That is very interesting, and it goes, for me, back to this conundrum of, I mean, obviously many people have been thinking about this, but, you know, Moses / Akhenaten, you know, what did he do up on that mountain when he was receiving the law? Who was he talking to? What happened there? You know, these kind of processes that initiated this whole cult of Judaism / Christianity. There's always been a really, you know, intriguing clues there for me anyway, in terms of what is this entity. One part of me thinks that this must be a kind of a robot, a type of an AI system run amok, if you will, almost. Or the other part of me is like, no, it's an ET or an alien then in that sense. But this, when we put it in under the umbrella of the Archons, it explains both of those things for me anyway. What about you, John?
It does indeed. Again, I want to suggest to those listening for the first time and those who've listened many times before, how powerful and instructive is the Gnostic teaching. It doesn't tell you what to believe. It doesn't ask you to believe anything, but it gives you vital insight into these realities. And then you can go on your own and use that insight. And it is the most. I mean, I'm a comparative mythologist, and I've studied every kind of spirituality on the planet that you can imagine. And I have to tell you that this is the most instructive and helpful diagnosis that I've ever seen of alien intrusion. It really works if you use it yourself. You have to use it. It's not just information you receive. It's a diagnostic tool. And the best is yet to come. Let's look at another aspect of their diagnosis of alien intrusion. The Gnostics gave us even more than that. Not only did they describe the method and manner and tactics of the Archons, that is to say, they would abduct people, they use fear on you, they paralyze people. They described all of this in quite vivid detail in the Nag Hammadi writings. But they also said that there's an even greater danger. They basically taught that there are two ways in which the Archontic mind parasites will infect humanity. The first way is that they will intimidate us by a false show of magic. They have a certain kind of magic. They do. They have psychic powers. They can stare at us and enter our minds through staring. They do remote viewing on human beings. And that's how they get in. One way they get into our minds is by remote viewing. And they can also trick us with their main skill, which is called HAL in Coptic, H-A-L. And HAL means a simulation or virtual reality. So from a Gnostic point of view, what is happening in an alien abduction, when someone witnesses a flying saucer out their window, a beam comes down from the flying saucer. They feel paralyzed with fear. They're sucked up into this vehicle. They're subjected to a gruesome examination of some kind. This is a virtual reality event. And it is real to the extent that virtual reality can simulate reality, but it is not actually physically real in terms of terrestrial reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so there again, you have from the ancient seers a clear explanation of how they would do this sort of thing, how they would intrude. But that's not the worst thing. What the Gnostics really warned was that the way that they will intrude and deviate humanity from its proper course of evolution is through religious ideology. They will do it through belief systems. And the Gnostics identified the salvationist belief system of Judeo-Christianity as the instrument of Archontic intrusion. It is the instrument. It is the main instrument in which they impact our behavior and get into our skins. Although they don't literally incarnate as human beings, we become so like them. We become so zombified in these religious belief systems of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We become so zombified in our behavior that it's just as if they had embodied themselves in us. That is their highest satisfaction, if you will.
Right. So that is the interface. That in that sense then answers that question that we wanted to get to earlier, how they are controlling humans and the interference or the the connection between them and us in that sense. But would you say, John, that in certain cases does it go beyond that? Does it extend beyond that point where one of them actually might, I don't know what to call it, possess, inhabit, walk into the body of someone else? Do you believe that could be happening?
It's not my understanding that is the case. I'm not ruling it out because I'm not omniscient. I don't have all the final answers. But in my close study of this phenomenon over many years, it's not my understanding that is the case. It's my understanding that they do not literally possess. I would say that possession, in cases of possession or diabolic behavior of possession, are cases where human projections are retroacted into the human psyche. Possession and diabolic behavior that we've seen, and there's many, much evidence of it in various cultures, is actually a human product, as far as I can tell. Until we start facing our own demons, until we understand what projection is. Many people don't even know what projection is, the phenomenon of psychic projection. But until we understand the basic dynamics of the psyche and the projection of negative and denied components of the psyche, we're not really going to understand possession. And then I think we could get to a point of explaining almost all, if not all, cases of possession and diabolic behavior from that viewpoint. And we could not falsely attribute that to the intrusion of aliens or other entities. So that's the line I take on it, just for what it's worth.
Yep. The abduction scenario, then, if we look at that a little bit more, we hear stories in some regards about updating DNA, changing DNA, fixing, meddling. We hear stories about hybrid programs, creating a hybrid race between us and them, maybe again bridging this interface so that they could be either part of us because of this Thonos or the jealousy that you mentioned before, that they want to become like us, they want to join with us. David Jacobs done tremendous work on this. What's your take on that, John?
Well, I have to be brutally honest with you. I think that it's largely delusional. I don't think there is a hybrid program, and I don't care how many people say there is. I'm saying I don't believe that is so. We are capable of, let me take a step back here and see if I can legitimate myself, because I know there's a lot of people who won't agree with me here. The Gnostics taught many things about humanity and our makeup. And one of the things they taught is that the goddess Sophia, the divine Sophia, who actually engineered the human genome, she is the source of the human genome, endowed us with a special power, which they call the luminous epinoia. And that is actually the power of imagination. And they tell in their backstory of the remote history and cosmology of the Earth, they say that when Sophia recognized the presence of the Archons in our solar system, and she saw that as humanity emerged and lived out its experiment on Earth, a divine experiment on Earth, that the Archons would interfere and try to interfere in various ways. She then gave us a gift and a power to resist their interference, which is the luminous epinoia, which is imagination. But there's a really big problem with human imagination, which I would put in this way. If you don't use your imagination correctly, someone else will use it against you. Or I would put it even in another way. If you do not use your imagination correctly, you yourself can even use it against you. Your imagination can become a delusional force. Now, I think that these rumors of these hybrid programs and all of this, first of all, the Gnostics said that the hybrid program failed and that they did not succeed. I think that they are products of our imagination. They're products of paranoia, basically. And that by going into these realms of paranoia, we are actually providing a mental theater where the Archons can play out their game with us, which is a mind game of betrayal and deceit. And that we actually betray our humanity by playing into these scenarios. But unless we have a way to direct our imagination and focus it on our true humanity, that is a risk that we face. So one of the things that I'd like to get to at the end of this conversation we're having about transhumanism is how to defeat transhumanism by getting into the true identity of humanity. Transhumanism is an attempt to create, as I said, a concept of humanity, a hybrid cybernetic species, superior to what we are, superior to being other animals, that is actually a betrayal of what our true potential is. If we could realize our true potential as magical children of Sophia, there wouldn't be any attraction in these games and in these scenarios. No attraction in the least.
True.
So I'd like to be, if you can remind me, Henrik, with a nudge, I'd like to get back to that aspect of solution, perhaps in the second half of our talk.
Absolutely. Let's do that, John, and let's. I want to run one more question, by you here, and then we can take a little break at that point. But let's talk about one more thing here, because there's another, problem here, or an issue of. I mean, because I still put the branch of abductions, maybe even onto the human realm, if you will. That this might actually be, military programs running. This might be the dramatic and traumatic yet subtle, if you will, manipulation of humanity over into a new age religion, if you will. And I can talk a little bit more about that. But this specifically has to do with a necessity that I can see now, both from the point of view of Christianity, Judaism, and maybe even Islam to a certain extent, that they've gone through different successions of reformations. They need to update their religion now and then in one sense or another. Now that we know that there's not a God up in the cloud somewhere because we're sending rockets up there, we need to expand the realm of these religions further, if you know what I mean. So in that sense, it's perfect from that point of view to say that there is somebody out there and they have created us. It kind of touches base a little bit with the science bit of this, but it's enough fiction, of course, to kind of put some question marks on it. But what I'm getting at is that we're seeing it traversing over to a new age religion, and I see that the aliens, if you will, then are kind of at the heart or at the center of this. And I guess I just would like to have your take on that, John. And I'm not saying that this is only maybe an invention, from the Archons, but it might be an extension of the manipulation that the Archons did on humanity, who are now kind of running on their own program and know simply that they need to update their own version of control, if you know what I mean. And we have so much of this, the alien phenomena disclosure. We have people talking about this on the TV. We mostly see it today, of course, in the context of an alien invasion. economists like Paul Krugman is sitting there now and kind of talking about a fake alien invasion that would be good for the economy. So I guess what I'm getting at is that this is really beginning now to really seep into the mass consciousness, if you will, of humanity. And the question is what the agenda is at the end of that. And I see that this is about a reformation and updating and a creation of a new age religion. What's your take on that, John?
Well, I would say you're tracking that closely, and my observations and suspicions about it are closely aligned to yours. First of all, I'd just like to make one point about abductions as being done by human beings to other human beings. As far as I can tell, and I follow Jacques Vallée on this and a few other people who are particularly astute, the whole ET UFO phenomenon since 1947, since Roswell, is a huge psyops. It's a huge psyops to cover up black ops and covert military operations and very sinister things that certain military gangs around the world are perpetrating. So when I say that, however, please understand that I do not dismiss the phenomenon. I do not say that the phenomenon of alien intrusion can be totally dismissed on that account. Not at all. As far as I know, following the mystery school teachings, there is a real threat of this archonic intrusion that needs to be faced. But we need to know who the real enemy is, and we need to see their face clearly and see their motives and their methods. So there's a trap that we want to avoid here if we can. A great deal of what is done and attributed to UFOs and ETs may well be just a psyops to cover up military black ops and sinister programs of abduction. And, I'm much more inclined to think that mad scientists on the earth, like the Nazis were known to be, are experimenting with hybriding and weird genetic and eugenic programs and abducting people and then blaming it on the ETs. You see what I mean?
Yep.
I'm much more inclined to believe that that humans are doing this. I mean, there's a double challenge presented by the Gnostic expose of the Archons. It's a double challenge, and we're right in that challenge right now. We're looking down the double barrel of this challenge. The first part of the challenge is to recognize who the alien predators are, to understand their MO, and to understand how to defend ourselves against them, which the Gnostics also explained. We can get into that in part 2. That's concerning the Archons. But they're not the real ultimate danger that humanity is facing right now. The ultimate danger that humanity is facing today is intraspecies predation. Intra, I-N-T-R-A, meaning within our own species. And so there is a part of the human species that has split off and become pathologically, criminally, murderously insane. I don't think that statement is going to come as a revelation to anyone listening to this interview. Okay? Now, I'm not being Nostradamus here, folks. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm saying this is happening. The planet has been taken over in the governmental, military, economic, educational, pharmaceutical sectors by murderous, deceiving psychopaths. And the real danger to our species now is to get the agenda of these psychopaths, to get their MO, to know who they are, and to take them down. Because they're not going to stop until they're taken down. So we've got quite a job on our hands here, and it's extremely important in facing this critical moment in our evolution to distinguish between that which is done to us by an alien intrusion into our minds, causing us to behave like zombies remotely controlled by some psychic entities, and that which is done to us by our own kind. You see?
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, transhumanism, if you ask me about what transhumanism is really just a name, it's a label. In a way, it's kind of misleading because it's a label that you can attach to the agenda of certain human beings who actually don't want to be human. And the main characteristic of all the human beings in the transhumanist agenda and the transhumanist gang is one simple thing that identifies them: fear of death.
Yeah.
They're afraid to die.
Yeah.
And so they want to upload their consciousness into a cybernetic organism, or they want to have nanomedicines and all of these. You know, you've interviewed many of these people and many of the detectives who are investigating them as well. And I'm here to say that that has turned them against humanity. So transhumanism is really a program of people who are anti-human. The trans part of it is a lie. If you want to go beyond humanity, you don't even know what humanity is. You don't even know what human potential is.
Yeah, exactly. And yet we're ready to leave it behind right away. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
And that, which is really stupid when you look at it, that stupid move, that obsession comes from people who can't face their own humanity. They hate humanity. They're against humanity, and they're scared to death of death. And I have a message for those people, those transhumanists who don't want to die. So I hope some of them are listening to this, because this is John Lash's personal message to you who don't ever want to die. Don't worry about it, folks, because when you die, nothing will happen to you because you're dead already. Okay? You're dead, because we can only live as human beings as long as the quality of humanity lives in us. Mm. And the Gnostics knew what this quality of humanity was, and they educated and nurtured it with tremendous care. It is the quality of innocence, of goodwill, of play. It is the quality of communication. It is the quality of seek and discover. It is the quality of trial and error, to be willing to make a mistake and learn from your mistakes. To be transparent with each other. These are the pure qualities of humanity. It's like a flame of the anthropos that burns in you. And these are people in whom that flame has been snuffed out.
Mm, yeah.
And even though they're walking around like you and me, and they're breathing, and they're eating, and they're excreting, they're dead, because their humanity has come to an end. And they're really like a dead branch on a tree. They're already dead. The Genome Project is going to go nowhere. It is a dead end. Transhumanism is a dead end. It's like a dead branch on a tree, and it goes nowhere, and it produces nothing.
I want to urge people just to open up Google or another favorite search engine of yours, and hopefully they will pick up it, and just search for Archon X Prize. Or go directly to a website that is called genomics.xprize.org. But search for Archon X Prize and take a look at that video on that first page, on that first hit you'll get, at least through Google, and you'll see something pretty creepy in terms of the genomic program, the human genome program that they've been running now since 2000 or before that, obviously. But this is just a little tidbit, obviously, and a hint, obviously, as well. We talked about this back in 2008, John, quite extensively in terms of their choice for the name of putting Archon on this. Very, very intriguing, incredibly intriguing, symbolic. But let's do this, John. Let's wrap things up with the first hour now and then continue proceeding. We have just so much more that we want to talk about and get to. The book is called Not in His Image. John Lash, excellent book, and the website you need to go to is metahistory.org for more information and research on all the things we've been talking about and so much more. Of course, the website is extensive. So I suggest we take a little break here then, John, and then we'll carry on in the next segment to talk more about all these things. So thank you for this. Stay with us, John. Welcome back. We are now in the second segment here together with John Lash. We are continuing on the trail, if you will, of the Archons, of transhumanism, on the interface, if you will, then between them and us, and how they have infected humanity in a certain extent, and also now that we're faced with the what John called the intraspecies part of this as well, we have a branch of humanity that has a death wish, if you will, connected with the elite, of course, and as we pointed out, I think it's very hard for anybody who is not looking close enough to disagree on that note. Everything around us is kind of falling apart, and this is one of the components that I want to try to weave into this a little bit later as well, John, about the fact that when things are dire, if you will, that is a chance from their point of view to have a great reform in many different ways, and I can't help to see that potentially maybe the alien card, if you will, it's going to be part of this in one sense or another, that they might be introduced, and this whole thing might be a big psyop to begin with. But I'll ask you about that a little bit later. I know, John, you wanted to bring up Melchizedek. Tell us a little bit about this and why this is an important aspect to what we've been talking about.
Sure. Melchizedek is a key factor in understanding the transhumanist agenda. As a matter of fact, you could say that Melchizedek is the icon of transhumanism, even though that name as such may not be mentioned. So I don't often like to go into the past. As you know, Henrik, I think there's a certain, we need to limit the time that we go looking at the problem and concentrate equally or more so on the solution right now. But as far as the problem of transhumanism is concerned, it's absolutely essential to go back and look at its historical taproot here for a minute. So that's why I brought up the Melchizedek issue. For those of you who are hearing this for the first time, I'd ask you to go on metahistory.org, go to the search box, and type in Zaddikim, Zaddikim. And you will come to a lexicon entry. It's the only word in the lexicon under Z. And this word Zaddikim is tremendously important because it represents the root or seed of the whole transhumanist agenda. If you want to go back and look at it, historically speaking, if you need to, if you feel that you get a better grasp on it that way, this can be done. And in Not in His Image, I believe I've made so far the only thorough and consistent historical examination of who Melchizedek is. So I'd like to point out how that relates to transhumanism and also how it relates to the Archons. Let's get back to the Archon mindset. Instead of sitting around watching television and anything that flickers and watching MTV, they work through things that flicker. Did you know that, Henrik?
Yep.
Yeah, when you're looking at anything that flickers, like a strobe effect, it creates a kind of interstice in your mind that breaks down your normal power of reasoning and observation and allows a subliminal intrusion. That's what subliminal cuts are, right?
That's right.
You could be watching a film and there are 36 frames a minute, and anything that's faster than that you can't see. So when they put in a subliminal cut, you don't really see it with your ordinary mind, but your brain sees it. And this is how the Archons can work through us. They work subliminally. They work through anything that flickers and works into our minds. But let's turn the game, two can play at that game. Let's get into their minds here for a minute, okay? Let's get into their minds, which we can do because Gnostics gave us enough of a profile of the Archons to do this. We know that their main power that they have is Hal, the Sanskrit word Hal, meaning virtual reality or simulation. And it's remarkable that the computer Archonic mind that takes over the mission in 2001 A Space Odyssey is called HAL.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So HAL is their ability to create a replica of something. As you said at the beginning of our talk, a synthetic life form. Now let's say that they can't, let's take the Gnostics' word on it. We live on the earth, which is the planet, which is the goddess Sophia embodied. The living goddess is beneath our feet. She gives us life. Sophia is also the entity from the galactic center who designed the human genome, along with another god called Thelete. So the Gnostic backstory says, don't have to wonder where humanity originated. We didn't originate on another planet. We didn't originate as in a lab experiment of another higher advanced civilization. We originated with the transcendental gods, the real transhuman entities that are in the galactic center. And the human genome was designed by Sophia and Thelete. And Sophia is here on Earth, and in the experiment that we're involved with of her design, the Archons can intrude. Well, what's the next best thing that they could do? Well, since they have this capacity for simulation or replication, the greatest triumph that they could achieve would be to replicate the human form, to produce a simulacrum. Now, you know Philip K. Dick, right?
Yeah.
Philip K. Dick was kind of a natural Gnostic. He had a Gnostic vision in 1974 where he got a big download of information, and he includes Gnostic themes in his novels, and the main theme of Philip K. Dick's writing is simulation, isn't it?
Yeah,
Simulacra.
that's right.
Absolutely obsessed with simulacra. Simulacra would be those creations of the Archons that we, if we come under Archon power, are unable to distinguish from the real thing. Like children can't distinguish violence in video games from real violence in the street, can they?
Yeah.
Many people can't distinguish plastic from pearl, can they? And this is the triumph of the Archons. And so what would be their ultimate triumph would be to create the perfect human replica that we could not distinguish from an actual living human being. Do you follow that logic?
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I want to say what I said in the first part of the talk. Don't worry about how many possible species might be preying on us. One is all it takes. And one replica is all it takes. One replica. Because if they succeeded in creating one replica of a human being, they would be able to use that replica to allow it to live in the earthly environment, because if it was a replica, it would appear to live as we do. You know, Archons don't breathe, you know, like we do.
Yeah.
But this would have a simulation of breathing. It would even have a simulation of breathing. And if they produced this perfect human replica, what a triumph that would be. Well, I have a feeling that they might have done that. And I believe I'm the only one who's made this claim. So I do, stand on originality on this point. If you go back to, if you look at that article on Zadokim on my site, you'll find the origin of the so-called Zadok sect of the ancient Hebrews. Zadok means the pure and the righteous ones. This would be the root of transhumanism. In other words, Zadok is the ideal to be something more than human. Can you catch that?
Yep.
Right? And the model for that ideal was given in this figure Melchizedek. So you find Melchizedek introduced in Romans, where St. Paul, as he's called, makes the claim that Melchizedek is actually the power behind Christ. And he describes Melchizedek in this way: without father, without mother, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest eternally. In other words, a perfect clone of a human being.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without father, without mother. What does that mean? Well, the transhumanists are already on that track, right?
Yeah, that's right.
They want to produce the perfect human being in a test tube, right?
True.
So what if the Archons have already produced this being? I'm going to come around now to the point that you would like to make and continue on here, because I don't want to take too much time with this, but I think you'll be fascinated. You might be fascinated by the way this hooks up to the one world religion. If they could succeed in making a perfect human simulacrum, imagine what impact that being would have on certain people in this world who want power and who want to live forever. It would be the proof to them that they could.
Yeah.
And people need proof, you know. And so suppose that you and I were someone from these higher circles of power of the globalist elite, and we have everything, you know, we have everything that the world can offer, but we want more, don't we? We want immortality. We want this clone-like status. And so we go to a secret meeting somewhere, whether it would be the castle in Belgium or a private estate in Sicily, which is where I think it happens, and meet this entity who looks like Melchizedek as represented on the wall of Chartres Cathedral. Very tall, thin, Gothic figure. Okay, this is Melchizedek.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we are told this is the proof This is the proof that you can be like this, that you can have this. And now you are under our command because we are giving you the ultimate proof of what you want. You see? So this would be the great, great con that might be the ultimate triumph of the Archons. And I have a feeling that they are going for a one-world religion, Henrik. I have a feeling it's the final game of their psyops. And I have a suspicion that they might parade out an entity like this at that moment. Because, you know, all the world religions have a messiah in them, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
There's the second coming of Christ. There's the Mahdi of Islam. There's the Maitreya of Buddhism. There's the Kalki Avatar of Hinduism. And so the New World Religion Con would meld all of these into a supreme messianic figure. It would need to be united in this figure. And so I very strongly suspect, as far as we can second guess the mind of the Archons and the people who are working for them, that this is what they might try to do.
Very interesting. It dovetails with that idea that it's a creation of something synthetic and artificial, something you alluded to earlier, and something we can see happening all around us all the time, even the environments. And I believe personally that this is part of this transition of making us more like them, if you will. It's evidence we get this under the guise of economics, of course, that we can't afford real materials anymore, and it's all petroleum-based linoleum floors, when there's an abundance of stone out there and wood and all kinds of things, things that grow and are natural. And to me, this is part of this transformation that is happening of humanity as well. Of slowly beginning to move away from the organic. And again, we go back to that idea of the THX type of society, an underground civilization, which is completely sterile and everybody's, shaved heads. And it's very, very strict and controlled and regulated. And also, furthermore, their whole mentality, their whole essence of spirituality is one of robotics almost, if you know what I mean, John. It's and the question is how far we are going in that process, because as you pointed out, I don't know if it matters if the external things are like a THX type of world or not, because if we're talking about if the mentality of the people already is there, if we're talking about these zombified human beings that are already in robots in relationship to their own humanity, then we're already there. We're already living in the nightmare, just that it hasn't manifested fully on the physical level yet, John.
Well, that's precisely right. Let's not put the cart before the horse here. The horse that is pulling us in the direction of this self-annihilation is the complete zombification or archontification of human behavior. And that's what will be manifesting on this agenda. And then whatever kind of scenario it will manifest in, whether it will be there's a variety of science fiction scenarios of the dystopian future, the alternative dystopian futures. Pick one which you will. But no matter what the setting is and the scenery, the basic behavior is what we're looking at. And it does seem, when you take a step back, I mean, it's a bit frightening. It does seem like there are so many things driving us toward that behavior, and so many signs and so many films. And are these films just, are they just warning us of something that is to come, or are they actually predictively modifying our behavior toward those scenarios? It's really frightening. It is. I would describe this. I call this the maw, the MAW, the maw being a name for like the mouth of a monster. Imagine this monster that has its mouth open, and it's a gaping maw, and there's this suctional force that is pulling us into the mouth of this monster, okay? And it seems at times to be coming at us from all directions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, one reason for that is because we're not centered in our humanity. And as long as we lose our humanity, we'll be pulled into the vortex of those people who have already lost it. You see?
Yeah.
The loss of humanity creates like a black hole in our species. The presence of the psychopaths in our world, it doesn't matter. There don't have to be a lot of them. What is the estimation, Henrik, on what percentage of any human population are psychopaths? What, 5 or 6%?
Something like that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I figure it's even probably less. Let's just say it was 3%. Say it was 3 people in 100, 30 people in 1,000. Those psychopathic, deluded human beings who have lost their humanity have a kind of suctional power about them that sucks the rest of us in their direction.
Yeah.
And unless we're grounded in humanity and in solidarity with each other, to recognize what it is to really be human, there's a tendency to be sucked into that game. And sadly, a lot of people, there's no middle ground in this psychological battle. There's no middle ground. There's no safe middle ground. Either you are being sucked into the black hole of anti-humanism and the annihilation of your species, and you're going to go down that dead branch, or you are standing with the earth and with the true power of our divine humanity. There's no middle ground.
I always go back to a quote by George Herbert Walker Bush, or Bush the Senior. I think this is the one when he talks or describes the New World Order and what it is, basically, and he makes an interesting comparison there, or he's trying to make an example when he talks about the implementation of rule of law, that this is what the New World Order is about. And this is not the rule of the jungle, but the rule of law. This is civilization and so forth. But this is also the edifice, then, if you will, that they have created a barrier around themselves. The inability for sensible human beings to spot the virus amongst them, if you will, and actually take matters into their own hands and actually cleanse these beings, if you will, off the face of the earth. I know it sounds brutal, but I think it's an interesting point here, that with the rule of law, which goes back to this, the draconian law, Draconis again, the dragon, right? This was a Greek statesman who put this in effect. He removed oral law and replaced it with written law and blood feud. And we think, oh my God, this is civilization here. This is good things happening. But at the same time, this is the removal of all things that were natural. And now they have created this artificial edifice of law and civilization and order and statehood around themselves, protecting themselves behind armies and legal paperwork. And we lack the ability to actually even approach these human beings. And then it just dawned on me that that's what he's talking about. He's talking about not the rule of the jungle, the natural law, the rule of nature. This is their version of law, and this is the artificial one, and this is what is so obviously so difficult, John, to battle with. It
is very difficult to battle with. Just might say that we've all heard that saying, where the rule of law, not the rule of the jungle. Well, look at the things that are done on this world in the name of the rule of law, the horrors and the murder and deceit.
Yeah.
And then compare that to what happens in the jungle. I'd say I prefer the jungle.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
There's nothing in the laws of nature that comes anywhere close to the scale of horror that is being perpetrated under this con. It's just a big con. And this con has been going on for a long time. I mean, historically, this Zadic cult of righteousness, who believed that they could do that, who believed that they could abide by the law of the Archon overlord and subject everyone else to that law or annihilate them, they go back to about 1800 BC, around the exact dates of Abraham, as you point out, And so the Archonic virus infected first a small sect of the Jewish people, a small group of the Jewish people. They were the vector. The Jews are the vector for the Archonic virus. That's why they have such an unfortunate story. That doesn't mean that all people of Jewish descent are, genetically infected. It just means that their religious culture was the vector for this parasitical mindset. And that's an observation that the Gnostics themselves made, by the way. So it's not a condemnation it's not a racist condemnation, but it's an observation of something that happened on this planet. And so, They protect themselves with this law, and it's very difficult to get to them. But that situation is changing as we speak, and there are ways to get to them. To a certain extent, their system of protection is breaking down. It has to break down because it's become too ornate and too Byzantine to be sustained.
And the bigger it grows, John, sorry to cut you off, but the bigger it grows, the weaker it gets as well. The fundament that it stands upon is based on immoral values, and it's shaky in its foundation. That's what I'm saying. And the more they pack on, the bigger they try to get. Once they've collapsed, the heavier they will fall. That's what I'm seeing in a way.
Yes, and I think we're seeing this happen right now. That's an observation that I make frequently. So we're really at the turning point in facing not only the archonic danger, the archonic risks that the Gnostics detected, but we're also coming to the showdown. It's what I call the gunfight at the not okay corral, the showdown with the interspecies predators. It's not okay that there are human beings on the planet who are deliberately and intentionally rigging everything against us. It's not okay. And one of the observations that I like to make about the planetary shift comes down to that simple point. There are many ways that we can talk, and a lot of grandiose terms and claims we can make about humanity awakening and planetary shift and so on. I do believe we are in that shift. I certainly am, and people I know are in it. But I would describe it in a more humble and simple manner. I would say that you come into the planetary shift by the realization of one simple truth. Problems and conflicts can arise between human beings, and always will, but they're all solvable because our nature is one of mutual aid. But those problems that are deliberately introduced cannot be solved. There are problems in our world that are deliberately and intentionally introduced, and they cannot be solved by the mutual agreement of human beings. They can only be solved by the elimination of the people who introduce those problems.
Interesting. It's like they don't have a let's say, how do we phrase it? There's not a true intent. There's no again, we're back to the synthetic artificial nature, that these things don't have the problem don't lie in reality. They lie in the artificialness of their intention. Therefore, there's nothing we can do to root them out, to sort them out, basically, right?
That's right. If the problems and conflicts on a global scale were simply based in the natural situations and natural course of events that human beings would encounter in living with each other, we could eventually sort them out between ourselves. But it's like if you have a family of 10 people, for instance, and there are differences in the family and brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers, they disagree, they can all sort it out among themselves. But if you have one member of that family who is intentionally and deliberately sabotaging the relations of the family, they will never be able to work it out. And we have most of the problems that we're facing in the world today in all these areas that I mentioned: military, governmental, economic, or financial terrorism, the pharmaceutical world, the world of black ops and psyops. All of this is intentionally directed against the synthesis of life. It's intentional. And intentional problems that are intentionally created cannot be solved. For instance, Israel.
Yeah.
Israel will never be solved because it was intentionally created to be a problem that never would be solved.
That's right. That's right.
And so despite all the good intentions of the Palestinians people or the Jewish people or the Christians, who I would remind you are just human beings, it's unfortunate if you put your religious identity or your racial identity before being human. But at the end of the day, we're all just human beings. We're human beings first, you know?
Yep.
You're not Swedish first and then you're human. You're a human being who happens to be Swedish.
That's right.
You know? period. And I would say you could say, maybe this sounds like an extreme statement, but I would say that the most widespread form of transhumanism on this planet, why does transhumanism seize our minds? Why is it a risk? Because we have this tendency to find our identity in other things before we find it in our humanity.
Yeah, it's true.
If we place our identity first in our humanity, then say, I'm a human being. I happen to be of Jewish blood. I happen to be born in Israel or born in Patagonia or born in Alaska. So what? When push comes to shove, it's going to be the human identity that survives. And this branch will die off. They're already on the path to self-annihilation, but there's a great sucking sound that comes along with that.
Yeah, no, but it's true. I mean, it's as we know, that the creation of nations is built on these same artificial constructs of
Right.
maps, lines drawn on maps, and it doesn't really mean anything. I personally believe that there's obviously a cultural identification somewhere along the line. There is such a thing as races, but at the end of the day, all those races are belonging to humanity, as far as we know. And so that's what's going on there. But to imagine that these are pertained within a fictitious border somewhere on a map, that's another lie that is actually, as we've seen, John, in history. It's actually when these artificial borders were drawn up, let's say even between Pakistan and India, right? We had a million and a half human beings dying in the process just because they drew a freaking artificial border on a map, the British,
That's right.
And so that's what that creates. It's problems,
Right.
Yeah.
The borders of Palestine, Israel, were drawn with a red crayon on a map. I mean, that crayon created a lot of grief for the human race.
Yeah.
Because it's a problem. It's a deliberately contrived problem. We can have problems and disagreements and conflicts between human beings, but when they are deliberately contrived, when the game is rigged, then we're looking straight at the perpetrators, and we really got to understand their MO and be as ruthless with them as they are with us, or more.
The zombies, those with the death wish, the intraspecies predators, have these people now become an instrument of nature? Are they going to take themselves down and in the process also take those with them who are, the only way you can look at it is those who would be willing to go along with them down, because those who have a healthy relationship, if you will, then to all of this would simply just take a step back and watch this thing crumble and fall and destroy, itself basically. But there's a dual nature to this. I believe that there's also a function, if you will, that they are fulfilling at this particular time. Would you agree with that, John?
Well, I don't believe that they're fulfilling a function in the sense that there's some divine or overarching plan and they're part of it. The risk of a deviance in our species is inherent from the beginning for a number of reasons. There are two risks of deviance in our species. One is the risk that comes from outside the species, which is the Archontic factor. But there is another of the risk that comes from within our species itself. And this is due to the simple fact that of the way our experiment on Earth is designed. You see, according to the Gnostics, the human anthropos has various strains, and other forms of humans, just like us, other strains of humanity are living on other Earth-like planets here and there around the galaxy. This is the Gnostic view, by the way. So they're living in different planetary worlds, which I call different kinds of experiments. And the conditions of their experiments could be quite different than ours. In order to understand the deviance that comes from within our species, this is what has to do with this part of us that needs to be eliminated, is that our experiment takes place in a symbiotic world where there are prey-predator relations. But these prey-predator relations, as you see between animals in nature, or between insects, between different kinds of fish, are natural and balanced in the overall symbiosis of this planet. We're not on a planet where certain animals don't eat other animals. We are on a planet where animals eat and kill other animals. Mm-hmm. And that is called a prey-predator bond. So when you look at nature and you look at it with detachment and honesty, and you don't get sentimental and sissy-faced about it, you realize that those relationships between prey and predator are beautiful and balanced relationships.
Yes, because that's part of the fear of death as well. Actually, that goes back to that idea that it's a disassociation that humanity has to those relationships that you just mentioned. That we don't want to recognize that, we don't want to look that in the face and be honest about it, and therefore it actually creates, I believe, an unhealthy relationship to nature, basically, and hence we could say that that's where the adaptation of transhumanism in one sense actually begins. You begin to accept the idea that what I'm seeing here is unnatural, and I don't want to have any part of this, and therefore I choose to walk in the opposite direction.
Exactly, and it's impossible. We can only walk in the path of symbiosis, that is the synergy of life. The divine synergy of life is evident everywhere on this planet, and it's no less evident, excuse me if I'm offending some delicate sensibilities, but it's no less evident in my cat killing a mouse or in a tiger killing a goat than it is in any other of the divine transactions of this planet.
Yeah.
These are divine transactions, and they are part of the constant recycling of life and death. We are part of eternal life. That is why it is a false solution for us to seek a replicated or synthetic form of eternal life. And you see that? If we seek the synthetic form of eternal life, as these transhumanist people propose, we're actually rejecting the form of eternal life that's already given to us in this cycle of death and rebirth, and the way that we learn that cycle from looking at the prey-predator relations around us. But the problem is that since we are a special case, we're not the superior to any other animals, but we're a special case among Gaia's progeny. We have the tendency to prey on our own kind. Now, as far as I know, no other animals will do that, except in a very briefly, in brief episodes under great stress. You see? Mm. We're the only animal species that will turn and prey on our own kind. And so when we don't face the divine synergy of the prey-predator relationship in nature and accept it, we then turn it, as you just said, we turn it back on ourselves. That's why these people who are claiming transhumanism and holding up the goal of a synthetic life form beyond death are actually pointing to annihilation. And they're going there. And they're getting there fast. They're getting there very fast.
This is an interesting point to me then, because does this necessarily mean that someone is preying on us the way we are, in that sense, then preying on others? Does this go back to the Archons, Earth as the, I don't know, energy farm? We're not talking about them eating flesh, human flesh perhaps,
right.
But someone is preying on our energy and using us in the same way that we use animals.
I would put it in this way. It's a very deep and difficult thing we're looking at here. And Rick and I want to be as cogent and clear in my language as I can be. There are two threats of predation that a sorcerer sees in the divine experiment on Earth. Two threats. One is the Archonic threat from outside. It's an extra-human threat. The other is the threat from within our own species. Now let's look at that just for a minute. Who is preying on us? Not tigers, not whales, not even scorpions and cobras. You might get bit by a scorpion, you might get bit by a cobra, but there aren't cobras coming to prey and wipe out our whole species, are there?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. But there are other human beings who are coming to prey and wipe out our whole species. This is the brutal reality of the psychopaths on this planet. And why do they do that? What is the question of predation? What is the worst predation? It's the predation of the people who've lost their humanity, feeding on the life force of those who still have it. Is that clear enough?
That is clear, yes.
Why are they attracted to children? Why do we hear these horror stories? You know,
Yep.
they rape and murder children, children of 10 years old. Look at a child of 10 years old. Look at a child of 10, 12 years old. Look at the beauty and innocence in that child. Look at the life, purity of the life force in that child. This is the anthropos as the gods themselves designed it. This is the luminous child, as it's called in Gnostic writings. Mm-hmm. You are that luminous child. When you are in your pure humanity, you are that luminous child. And these zombies, these psychopaths who have lost their humanity, the flame of humanity has been snuffed out in them. And so they become predators, and they go to that which is living and prey on that which is living. When we can see this prey-predator connection in our own midst, we're halfway to winning the game. But we really have to
John, you're talking about these pedophiles, the epidemic situation that we're faced with these horrendous crimes that are happening, as you're saying, towards children, you know, and this is something that is, we haven't, I think, begun even to fully realize the extent of this. We hear, as you say, horror stories coming to the surface all the time, and what is it that they're preying on in this situation? Do you believe? Is it
that they actually, the beauty and the life and the vitality of other human beings, the beautiful vitality?
And is it just the destruction of that feeds them, or is it that they actually are taking the energy, the innocence, if you will, of a child and feeding them?
Very good question. Very, very good question. It would be my guess, and this is just an educated guess, because we're looking here into the face of the beast right now. You know, we're staring down the beast right now, the beast of Satanism, by which I mean not some cosmical, diabolical force outside of us. I mean, Satan just means the adversary. You know that.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the satanic in ourselves, that is the adversary to our own species. I would say that they don't feed on it, that it isn't nourishment for them, but they have a tortured desire to snuff it out, and that they somehow feed off the murder of it. It's a horrible thing to say, but that's my guess. Mm. They feed off the murder of it. They feed off killing it off. Because you see, there's one thing about people who are not dead, people who are not really alive, people who are dead, is that they can't bear. Wilhelm Reich wrote about this, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just looking now at the Wilhelm Reich really saw this coming. I'm just looking at the homepage of Metahistory, where I quote from The Function of the Orgasm by Wilhelm Reich, a book that everyone should keep under their pillow, by the way. Knowledge of that which is alive can alone banish terror. You see? Mm. And we're facing terror. Where does terror come from? It comes from the unliving. These people are not alive, and they crave contact with what is alive, but they also crave to destroy it at the same time. That is the insanity. And I have to warn you that you can never go into a complete analysis of insanity. Otherwise, you will become insane.
This is the Gordian knot that you eloquently mentioned last time. Yeah.
So as we are here, trying to do, as we often do, courageously trying to understand the insanity of the human race, we need to know how far we can go and no further. And I think we're just about at the limit.
Yeah, you're right. No, exactly. At a certain point, it becomes more about representing or basically holding the energy of the things that we consider to be, beautiful and honest and righteous and true, and actually just preserving, if you will, that energy in the world simply by acting on that, being that, if you know what I mean, to make sure, as a kind of a promise to make sure that it won't leave the planet at a time like this when it seems that it's going away. You know what I mean?
That is so true. That is so true. What you're saying. I would give you this analogy. This vortex of terror, this psychopathic, pedophiliac, murderous insanity, which is actually destroying itself, could be compared to a black hole. But just imagine that this black hole is also like a magnet. And since there are iron filings distributed around the perimeter of the black hole, there's a tendency that those iron filings, as the magnetism of the black hole gets stronger, as this vortex of destruction reaches its culmination, the particles that are in the perimeter will tend to get drawn into the vortex, right?
Yeah.
The only way to not get drawn into that vortex is to be in another field that's stronger. And that field is our connection to the earth. You're connected to that field right now by the earth beneath your feet. You're connected to it by the iron streaming in your blood. That is a resonant magnet bonded to the iron flowing in the electromagnetic field of the earth. And the earth is not only our mother, but she is the Sophia who created humanity. We are the child of her genius. And by the connection with her and the connection to the earth, we develop a magnetism that is stronger than the magnetism that pulls us into this vortex of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reconfiguration of the magnetic field of the earth right now as we're living is a sign that the dead growth, the dead limbs and dead branches of humanity will fall away. But it's not like what the eugenics freaks of the New World Order are telling us. They're not going to cull us. It's they who are being culled.
Yeah, that's right.
And they know it. And somewhere in their paranoid minds, they know it. You see?
Yeah. Well, again, just look at their behavior and the way they're lashing out. Their incredible control need. And again, these are just the peripheral signs, if you will, of the things that we've been talking about. The surveillance grid, the constant monitoring, the all-seeing eye of this kind of artificial intelligence, system that they're building up with their data infrastructure. That's just the surface of all of this. People might look at that and say that is the beast, but it is not. It's the nature of those who've created it that is the beast, and then they're just coming up with different tools, if you will, John, to actually implement their the fear that they see around them, and the need that they, I guess, have to try to still remain on this planet. These are the efforts that they're trying to do to hold on. They're feeling that they're slipping away all the time, and they need to find something to lash onto, to hold on to. So from that point of view, I think it's encouraging to see how desperate they are. Actually, to see that they are very fearful of the small regular human being and their need to pry into their lives and investigate and look into and spy is because they're so fearful of even the tiniest, if you will, then little human being at this point, and they need to know. It's the information. Give us everything that you have, data. It's incredible to see it.
Yeah, I just noticed today when I went on Google that there's this little colored arrow. When you go to the Google page, there's this little colored arrow, that blue arrow that goes up to the corner, and then on the bar at the top of the Google page it says +U.
+U.
And if you
that's right.
yeah, you click it, it says, "Oh, great! Create a public Google profile. Give them all my personal information." So they can keep watch on me, because they have to have an eye on every single kid and adult on this planet in order to fulfill their program. And it is not working.
No.
Their desperation is escalating to monumental levels.
Yep.
It really is. And when you see how much effort they have to put into keeping people afraid, everything we hear is to make us afraid. Everything,
Yeah.
Then that's the measure of how desperate they are. Because as long as you're not afraid and you resist that, you can see it. Don't be sucked into the fear. That's their primary tool. That's also the primary tool of the Archons, is fear.
Yeah, and that is one of the problems, if you will, depending on the relationship to the information that we're getting from primarily now, obviously the mainstream media. That's been happening for all this time, but also the alternative media, that there is a kind of a conspiratainment. It's on a level where it's like an obsession to consume the bad news all the time about everything, that is happening around us all the time. And this is, of course, the manipulation of perception as well. I've argued this for a long time, that go out wherever you are in your, area, your city, whatever, and try to, obviously there's signs there of Big Brother, of the New World Order, but at the same time, unless you're in a full-fledged war situation, you're not going to see it in that way. But if you read the news, if you read the alternative news, that is what you're also on one level is led to believe it's going on all around you. And that's one of the problematic situations. I understand that people want to read up on this, they want to know what's going on, and yes, it is happening in one sense. Legally, there is changes in the laws and implementation of certain things, but I don't believe that it's as bad as we're seeing it from certain media outlets, if I put it that way, John.
Unfortunately, even though we've all acquired a significant education in how psychopaths are running our world, we've all acquired this education through the alternative media, such as yours, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've been educating ourselves like crazy now for the last 10 years, and we've grown by leaps and bounds in our understanding of the global control system. But unfortunately, far too much of the alternative media also feeds into fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. It's unfortunate, but I've always argued this anyway, John, that it's also up to the student of the information, those who are the consumers, if you will, in that sense, because it's at the end of the day nothing else. Even though that this might be life-changing information that you're reading, or this is the drop that makes your cup to flow, or if you will, that actually you come to realization about a certain thing and decide to hence therefore transform your life, which is a fantastic thing. That's a good thing. But at some point as well, it's up to the consumer of that information to make a decision to maybe move on into another area, look at something else, or try to implement whatever you're doing in a different way. And no one else can tell you when or why that is. That's just a self-realization that I hope happens with the majority of the people who are in the alternative news world, if you will, John.
Well, yes. I would agree with that. Just offer the little rule that I use for simplicity's sake. I take in information. I'm careful about taking in information that's just information, especially about going down rabbit holes. I don't go down rabbit holes. I'm not a fox terrier,
Yeah.
But I am interested in that information that brings responsibility. And that's one of the things that's so powerful and instructive about the ancient teachings of the mystery school and about the Sophia vision story and the teachings of the Gnostics, is that it carries a lot of responsibility. And if you accept that responsibility, that information then becomes a tool for you, yes, as you say, to transform your life and the life around you. And this is the kind of information we really need right now, because we're in the clinch of this battle. We're in a war on this planet. We're deep in psychological warfare for 10 years now. And we're coming to the turning point of this war.
And so basically to begin to head out of this, the vortex of observation of the Archontic forces, the intraspecies predators, etc., maybe we can just go back to this idea once again then, that the true identity of humanity that you've been arguing is the solution to transhumanism, to some of these problems that we've been discussing, that we need to touch base again with what we are and the power. I guess in that sense, power might be the wrong word, but there's a force within humanity, right? Yeah.
Power is the right word. I would love to pick that up. Perhaps we could focus our next talk, which would be in continuity here with this talk, on the true identity of humanity. I thought a lot about this, our talk over the last few days, what I could say, because as you know, I want to speak to solution as well as to problem. What I could say about the solution and what I came up with is exactly what you just said. The cure and the solution against transhumanism is to understand who humanity really is. And once we know what our humanity, where it originates and how we are really made, which the Gnostics taught, and I can explain what they taught, the 5 components of our humanity as they taught it, we have an option. We say, I choose my humanity. I don't choose this synthetic life form that's held out to be better than my humanity. How could I know if it was better than my humanity if I didn't know what my humanity was in the first place?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And all your life, you've been prevented from learning those things as well, and it's been consciously withheld from you. So how about that?
Well, religion doesn't teach us what our humanity really is. It gives us a false paradigm. Science certainly doesn't teach us. Darwinian science doesn't teach us. But that was the self-assigned role of the Teleste in the mystery schools, was to teach the vision of the true humanity, the origin of humanity from the galactic center, and how we were designed. I can actually explain that in Gnostic terms, how we are designed, how our faculties are designed. And by the use of those faculties, we know what human potential really is. And once we know that, there is no limit to what we can be here and now, right here and now. Let's be everything we can be right here and now with the planet, on the planet. And then we'll see what we could be somewhere else in the universe.
Yeah. So maybe that then, John, is a good place to begin to wrap things up here for this time. And then I agree with you. We could actually instead then focus a whole program, if you will, or at least the 1 hour on discussing more of the solution-oriented nature that you've been writing about and thinking about, and these 5 components of humanity, and leave it for that for now then. But I mean, it's been really interesting to touch base with you again on this topic of the Archons, of the artificial / synthetic nature around us, and also tying it in not only with the problem thing, but also beginning to alluding to some of the solutions, and the fact that we can make people aware again of the agenda of the transhumanists, and why so many people are jumping on the bandwagon of this as well, and think it's a great and a good thing basically at the end of the day. But if we again refocus on what we are and understand that we've been prevented from knowing exactly what humanity is and the true power we do have, then that's not an avenue and an area that humanity needs to go down,
No, and the last thing that I would say, once again, thank you for the opportunity to revisit this subject, because it does provide a platform to go into solution. But the last thing I would say is don't be intimidated, Don't be intimidated by the madness of people who think that we can make humanity into something better than nature has made of it. Because they're just talking out of their egos, out of their greed. A lot of the transhumanist agenda is just about money, Yeah. It's interfacing with the pharmaceutical companies, doesn't it?
Sure does.
So, don't be intimidated and feel, I'm missing the boat if I don't get on the transhumanist agenda. Because, as the Gnostics said, in the consummation of the work of the Archons, they will be defeated by that luminous child. And that's us. That's the real humanity.
Absolutely. Positive words. Let's wrap it up on that note then for this time. So much more to discuss, and we're going to carry on then and proceed at some point as well with you, John, and talk more about this. In the meantime, we relay people further to your website, metahistory.org, and obviously your excellent book with the title Not in His Image, available through Amazon, through your website, and we will have links up both to your website and to the book so people can take a look at that as well. Thank you so much for your time today, John. Excellent touching base with you again. Good to talk to you.
Yes, my pleasure. See you the next time.
That concludes our program for this time together with John Lash, but we're going to be back with more in just a few days, so keep your eye on the website for all the latest developments. In the meantime, I want to say thanks to all our members out there and to everyone at Red Eyes Creations as well for making this possible. Have a good day wherever you are. We will talk more soon. Take care.